Okay, B'ezrat Hashem, today in Masechet Megilla, we're holding on Tet Zayin Amud Aleph. Oh, yeah, the light goes off. Lights, camera, action. Tet Zayin Amud Aleph. 16a in Masechet Megillah, and we are beginning the fourth line on the page. Tet Zayin Amud Aleph. Hechin lo. Hechin lo. That's what we're holding. And today we're really going to discuss for most of the day the turnaround. This is the point in the story of the Megillah where the Psukim talk about how events start to turn. Meaning the Gezerah that Haman had sent out to destroy the Jewish people, we begin to see cracks forming in this Gezerah, and it begins, as we finished off yesterday, with that night that Achashverosh can't sleep. So he's tossing and turning, and he's thinking to himself, maybe the Esther and Haman are plotting some sort of a rebellion against me. We went through. And then he thinks, but I have to pay back somebody who I didn't give good to, and that's why nobody's telling me about this active rebellion. So then he says, who was it? They read from the Chronicles, they read from the history books. It was Mordechai. Mordechai didn't give him. And then that minute, who walks in? Haman walks in. Haman had built a gallows, some sort of a tall pole, that he wanted to hang Mordechai on, and he wanted to get the king's sign-off on this. So he walks in, and he says, Achashverosh, Yosef, join us, Bakasha. Not Yosef. Achashverosh tells Haman, Yosef, good day. Achashverosh tells Haman what should be done to the man that the king wishes to honor. Meaning to say is, he wanted to give kavod to Mordechai. So he says to Haman, what do you think I should do to the one that I want to give kavod to? Now Haman assumes he's talking about himself, which makes sense, he's the top-ranking officer. So he says a whole bunch of things which we'll get to in a minute. We'll put him in the royal clothing, and he should ride on the royal horse and proclaim throughout the town, etc. And then Achashverosh turns around to Haman and says, okay, do that for your arch enemy, do that for Mordechai. That's exactly what we're going to get to now. Now this symbolizes the turning point, because the Geulah didn't happen yet, but we're going to see through these events, eventually, the things turn around. So let's see that inside now. The Gemara tells us, Hechin lo, the pasuk in Megillat Esther, it says, Haman had prepared a tree, or a gallows for Mordechai. Now the simple pshat is, he had prepared this tall pole or area to hang Mordechai. But Tana lo hechin, actually if you flip the letters, lo hechin, the Braita says, he prepared it for himself. Meaning is that he didn't realize, but he was building his own death warrant when he built those gallows, because actually that became the gallows he was hung on eventually. So he says all kinds of wonderful things, Haman. He says all kinds of wonderful things that should happen to the one the king wishes to give honor. And Achashverosh turns around and says, V'aseh ken leMordechai. Do that for Mordechai. He says, do everything you just said for Mordechai. Amar le, so Haman's trying to avoid this. So he says, Manu Mordechai. Which Mordechai? So I mean, there's a lot of Mordechais amongst the Jews. So Amar le, Achashverosh HaYehudi, the Jewish one. I guess there was Mordechais by the Persians also, I don't know. Amar le, Tuva Mordechai Ika b'Yehudai. So Haman said, there's a lot of Mordechais amongst the Jews, a pretty common name. So Amar le, Achashverosh said, Hayoshev b'Sha'ar HaMelech, the one that sits by the gate of the king, means an officer. The officer Mordechai the Jew, there's only one. So Amar le, so Haman's okay, I have to do these things for him, wow. Let's try to limit what I have to do at least. So he said, Sagile b'chad diskarta. It's enough that I give him one village. I believe it means to collect the taxes of one village. Kfar, a village. Meaning, let's put him in control over one village. That should be his kavod. But not all the things that we said. In Amir, or perhaps b'chad nara, one river, he could be in control of the taxes of one river. So Amar le, so Achashverosh said, Hanami havli, give him that as well. Means give him all the kavod plus that kavod that you're trying to weasel out. Give him all of that. Al tipo davar mikol asher dibarta. Don't let one thing that you said fall from your words. Which means you have to give him all of that kavod that you said. Can you imagine the turnaround here? It's unbelievable, because we said all of the kavod and all of the wealth and the children, all of that Haman had, he wasn't happy. And then we see in the end, all of that is even taken away from him. It's like, you see that, unbelievable. So, he took the royal clothing and the horse. And what happened? So the Gemara tells us a fascinating story when he went to approach Mordechai, because he needed to go now tell Mordechai, look, I've been commanded by the king that I need to dress you up in the king's clothing, ride you around town on the royal horse, and proclaim in front of you, this is what happens to the one that the king wishes to honor. So Azal Ashkache Diatvi Rabbanan Kameh, so he found that Mordechai was sitting, and the rabbis were sitting in front of Mordechai. Now Mordechai was the leader, so he was teaching them halakha. Today, the day they were sitting was the 16th of Nisan. Remember? Because we said the decrees were sent out on the 14th, and then the 14th, 15th, and 16th, and Haman was eventually hung the 14th at night. That's the storyline here. So the rabbis were sitting around Mordechai, and he was teaching them the halakha that would have been nogeya when there was a Beit HaMikdash on the 16th of Nisan. What was that halakha? The halakha of the Omer. The Omer is a special barley offering brought on the second day of Pesach that permits the new grains that were grown over the last year, and that's burnt the second day of Pesach, which is the 16th of Nisan. So he's sitting there and teaching them the kmitzah. Kmitzah is the process where they would take a three fingers full of flour and burn it, part of the Omer. So the Gemara tells us like this. He found that the Mordechai was teaching the laws of kmitzah, which is this flour offering, a part of the flour offering to the rabbis. When Mordechai saw that Haman was coming towards him with horses in his hands, so Mordechai became nervous. He said, what? He said, what? Meaning probably this guy is coming to Haman. They knew Haman hates Mordechai. So they got nervous. They said, probably, why is he coming with a horse? Maybe he's taking Mordechai to jail. We don't know exactly what's going on. Right. So they got nervous, right? Yeah. So Amar Lahu Rabbanan, so Mordechai said to the Rabbanan, this Rasha is coming to kill me. Zilu mekame, leave here. So you shouldn't be burnt by his coal. Meaning, you guys escape, go away. He'll kill me, and that'll be what it'll be, because probably that's what's going to happen. So Ba'isha at that time, Netatef Mordechai Bikame Litziluta. So Mordechai didn't have, you have to remember also, it's the third day of fasting, so he's very weak. So he puts on his talit, he wraps himself, and he starts to pray. He sees Haman approaching. He can't fight him, so he figures he'll start to pray. He doesn't know what Haman's intentions are. So Haman comes and he sits in front of them. He doesn't want to disturb Mordechai's tefillah. I guess he figured if he's davening, what am I going to do? So he waited until Mordechai finished his davening. So Amar Lahu, Haman said to Mordechai, what were you just involved with? What were you just teaching the rabbis? What was the... So Amar Lei, the rabbi said to him, Bizman shebeit hamikdash kayem, when the temple was around, mand min adev mincha, if somebody would pledge to bring a flour offering, maiti malekumtzi de sulta, he would bring a fistful of flour, umitchaper lei, and it would act as a kapara for him. Meaning just a little bit of flour, and that was a kapara. So Amar Lahu, Haman said, Ata malekumtzi kim chadidchu, v'dachi asara ilfi kikri kaspadidi. Your fistful of flour pushed away my 10,000 talents of silver. Meaning my entire plan to destroy the Jewish people is slowly unraveling. Remember, I used that money, that's what Haman is saying, to attempt to buy the Jewish people, even though Achashverosh refused it. Remember, we spoke about this yesterday, actually. But my attempt to destroy them is being negated, thwarted, because of your korbanot, because of this discussion of the flour offerings. So Amar Le Rasha, Mordechai said back, wicked one, Eved shekana nechasim. Remember we said, Haman was really the slave of Mordechai. So he says like this, we know the rule is in halacha, if a slave owns property, it's owned by his master. So you're talking about 10,000 talents of silver, that wasn't your property. Because Mordechai said, I own you. It's a backstory here. And therefore, Eved lami v'nechasim lami, who is the Eved owned by, and who is the property owned by? So therefore, you didn't own that in the first place. What's that?
Why would he say that he's a slave?
He was. Haman was a slave of Mordechai.
How?
Oh, we'll talk about a different time. I don't get into it.
But right now you just came to dinner.
Correct. His saying is, you think you owned all that money and you could buy the Jews, you don't even own that money. So Haman says to Mordechai, come, wear the royal clothing, ride on the royal horse, because that's what the king requested. So Amar Lei, so Mordechai said back, Lo yachilna, I'm not able to. Why? I've been fasting for 3 days, and I'm not clean. I haven't showered. I haven't taken a haircut. I'm not presentable to put on the royal clothing and to ride the royal horse. Lo yachilna adayalna lebei. I'm not fitting to do this till I go to the bathhouse. And also I get a haircut. It's not appropriate to use the king's garments and items in such a state. So Shadra Esther v'asartina lekula beibani lekula umni. Esther sent a message in Persia to all the bathhouses and all of the barbers that they should go on leave. It means all of the bathhouse attendants, the people who would take care, they went home, and all of the barbers went home. So now Haman was faced with a bit of an issue. Mordechai needed a bath, he needed a haircut, but there was nobody at the bathhouses and at the barber shops to take care of Mordechai. I guess he couldn't give himself a haircut. So Haman was forced to go with Mordechai to the bathhouse and give Mordechai a bath, assist him. That was the normal thing back in the day. Somebody was the attendant. And he went and took scissors from his own house, the kashakil beimazia, and he gave Mordechai a haircut. So he went from being top officer in the kingdom to being relegated to the barber. That's what happened now. So as he was giving Mordechai a haircut, ingad ve'itnach, he groaned. He felt very embarrassed. This is very degrading. So Amar Leah, Maika mitnachat. So Mordechai said to him, what are you kvetching about? Amar Leah, Gavr davachashiv leila malka mikula raver vanoi hashta l'shavi bel'ani v'sapar. A person who was the most significant of all the officers. He's talking about himself. Now I'm a bathhouse attendant and now I'm a barber. Means that's why I'm groaning. This is very degrading for me. So Amar Leah, so Mordechai said back. Interesting, we didn't know this part of the story either. Rasha, velav sapar shel Kfar Kartzum aita. Weren't you the barber in the city of Kfar Kartzum? Means you were once, the truth is, you were a barber once. Tana, because the Braita teaches us, Haman sapar shel Kfar Kartzum aya 22 shana. For 22 years, Haman was actually the barber of a city called Kfar Kartzum. So Mordechai said, you have a history in this. What are you getting upset about? You know, that's what it is. When you hold yourself to too high of a standard, then things like this, they bother you a lot. You know. Okay, so they got the haircut. He got washed. After he got the haircut, it's interesting because it says he was first washed and then he took a haircut. I would think it should be done the opposite. Because when you get a haircut, you get hair on you and then you want to take a bath after. Just think it switches it around.
I'm sure they
washed it off. Interesting thing. I don't know why. Anyways, okay. But after he took a haircut, a blow dryer, right? He wore the royal clothing. So Haman said to Mordechai, get up on the horse. Get up. Come on. So Mordechai said, I'm too weak because I fasted for 3 days and I can't get onto the horse. So Gachin v'salik, Haman bent over and Mordechai ascended onto the horse by stepping on Haman. Kisalik, and when he ascended on Haman, Batbe, Mordechai kicked him. That's very interesting. Give him a kick. Give Haman. So Amar le lochtiv lechus. Haman said, doesn't it say in your Torah, bin fole vecha al tismach? It says when your enemy falls, you're not supposed to rejoice. This Haman knew a lot of the Torah. It's very interesting. So he said, we know the Torah tells us, it's in Mishle, bin fole vecha al tismach. How are you giving me a kick? It's like taking advantage. So Amar le Mordechai said back, Hani mili b'Yisrael. That's only by Jews. Avobididchu, regarding you, Amalek, the enemies like that. The pasuk tells us in Zot HaBracha, "Ve'atal b'motem tidroch." You should trample their high places. Means there's dafke and yan to kick, to show such degradation because they're such enemies. Now, Psukim tell us that what ended up happening, Haman is leading Mordechai around on the horse throughout the cities of Shushan, the streets of Shushan, and it says, Vayikra lefanav, he's calling out in front of him, so shall be done to the man that the king wishes to honor. The Gemara tells us that when they were walking by the street of the house of Haman, Chazite Barte de Kaima Igra, his daughter, Haman's daughter, is a famous story, was standing on the roof of their house, and she looks down and she sees somebody's leading the horse and someone's on the horse. So she assumes her father is the highest ranking officer. And Mordechai at this point had a death warrant against him. He was not doing too well. So she figured the one leading the horse is Mordechai, the one on the horse is Haman, her father. Savra haiderachiv avua, haidemaski kamei Mordechai. So she figured the one leading is Mordechai, and the one that's on the horse is Haman. So shakla atzitza debetakise, she took the chamber pot of the bathroom, and they didn't have indoor plumbing, and she threw it on the head of her father, the guy in the front. Dali Eine, he lifted his eyes, she lifted her eyes. No, he lifted her eyes. He lifted his eyes, and she saw that it was her father. He lifted up, and she saw it was him. She fell from the roof to the ground, and she died. I guess out of desperation or such overwhelming disgrace, she jumped off the roof and she died. She committed suicide. And that's what it means when it says in the pasuk, it says Mordechai returned to the gates of the king after this incident. It says he returned to his sackcloth and his fasting. It means even after all this honor was given to him, they weren't out of the woods yet because there was still such a decree. Haman still wanted to kill them. So he went back to his fasting. But Haman hurried to his house. Avel v'chafoy rosh. He went mourning with his head lowered. What is that referring to? Avel al bito, so mourning over his daughter who had been killed. V'chafoy rosh al she'iralo, and disgraced. His head was lowered in disgrace because of what happened to him, because of this degrading incident that he had to lead Mordechai like this around the town. Now, Vayisaper Haman lezeresh ishto. It says in the psukim, it says in the psukim that he gets home after this, and this is like the epitome of degradation for him, right? Mordechai is his arch enemy. He hates Mordechai, and he has to go around town giving the greatest kavod to Mordechai, his enemy. You can imagine also, just think about it for a second. Everyone knows Haman hates Mordechai, and everyone knows that he has a death warrant against him, a death wish against him, and everyone knows that Haman, because he's the highest ranking officer, has far more power than Mordechai. It means it's clear. And then we have this incident where Haman is forced, against his will, to have to undergo this process of total... This is completely humiliating. I mean, this is unbelievable. And we said yesterday the other officers also hated Haman. So this must have been very interesting dynamic throughout the entire... everyone involved. So the psukim say Haman gets home and he tells his wife Zeresh, his wife's name was Zeresh, and all of his loved ones about this incident. So the Gemara tells us, Kariluhu avav, Kariluhu chachamav. Sometimes it calls those people he was speaking to in his house his loved ones, and sometimes it says his chachamim, his advisors or his wise ones. So Rabbi Yochanan, Kol omer davar chochma, afilu beumot ha'olam nikra chacham. This teaches us that somebody who says something of chokhmah, of wisdom, even amongst the goyim, is called a chacham. You could call him a wise person. As we're about to see, they gave him intelligent advice, or great advice. What did they say? Imizera Yehudi Mordechai v'gomer. They said to Haman, look, unfortunately, if this fellow that you were trying to prosecute, or persecute, is from the children of the Jews, etc. Now what were they saying? They said to Haman like this. If he's from one of the other tribes of the Jews, besides the four we're about to list, so you'll be able to overcome him. But if he's from one of these four tribes, which we know he was from Yehuda and Binyamin, according to some shitot. So, lo yachotla, you will not be able to overcome Mordechai, because these four tribes, once they start to ascend, they start to succeed, you're not able to overcome them. How do we know that? Yehuda dichti, because regarding Yehuda, it says in Vayechi, it says, Yadcha ba'oref oivecha. Your hand will be at the nape of the neck of your enemy. Meaning to say is that when they run away from you in war, you'll be able to overcome them. So if he's from Yehuda, you're not going to be able to conquer him.
I thought that it was a wife of Haman.
Yeah, meaning it calls him his loved ones and his wise ones, meaning it means his family. Okay. I think it was his wife, you're right. I think you're right, actually. She's part of his loved ones, or as we're calling them, wise ones, because she's giving this advice. And the other ones, means the other three tribes, which is Binyamin, Ephraim, and Menashe, it says in Tehillim, Lifnei Ephraim, Binyamin, and Menashe, in front of these three tribes, Orarat Givuratecha, your might was aroused, means you were able to overcome. So the psukim say that they tell him, Kinafol tipol lefanav, you will certainly fall in front of Mordechai. This must have been very hard to hear. But that's what his family was telling him, his advisor, saying, look, you have no choice here, you're going down. Darash Rabbi Yehuda bar Elai, shtei nefilot alalu lama. Why did they say twice that he was going to fall? Nafol tipol. So Amr lo, they said like this, Umazo, this nation, meshulal afar umeshulal kochavim, is compared to dirt and is compared to the stars. Kishehein Yordin, when they descend, when they act wrong and they fall down, Yordin adla adafar, they fall down till the ground. Ukishehein olin, but when they go up, when they're doing what they need to and they're going in the right direction, olin adla kochavim, they shoot till the stars. Now the psukim say that he's over there in his house and he has, literally waste on his head, and he doesn't even have time to get himself cleaned up. This Sarisei HaMelech higiu, the officers of the king arrive. Remember, there was a second party that Esther had invited him and Achashverosh to, and now he was being rushed to that second party without the time even to clean himself up. Vayav ilu, and they rushed him, they made haste. Melamed, it teaches us that they brought him in a confused or overwhelmed state. He didn't even have time to clean up. At this party, Esther, she begins to tell Achashverosh, when Haman arrives, she says, look, I'm going to ask you my request now. After the original entering your chamber is the first party, now the second party, I and my nation have been sold, and Kinim Karno Amini V'Ami V'Gomer. Ke'ena Tsar Shova B'Nezek HaMelech. And the psukim say, she says, the enemy is not worthy regarding the damage that he gives to the king. Now, Amr Lo, she said to Achashverosh, Tsar Zeh, this enemy, Eino Shoveh B'Nezek Shel Melech. He doesn't care about the damage that he's doing to the king. So she proposed this, she presented this as Haman had a plot against Achashverosh. And you can imagine this fed perfectly. I don't know if she planned this or not, but this fed perfectly into what Achashverosh had been thinking. Remember, he thought Haman and her were creating a plan against him. So now, which she was able to accomplish because she invited Haman to the parties. Now she's turning towards Achashverosh and saying, Haman doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about the damage. And how did she say that? She supported it like this. Ikni ba bevashti v'katla. He incited against Vashti, means he gave the plan that Vashti should be killed. She was killed. Hashta ikni bedidi vit umibai lemikdelai, and now he wants me to be killed. Now really, he didn't want the queen to be killed. And the second incident for sure not is he wanted the Jews to be killed. Happens to be the queen was a Jew. But the way she presented it was Haman has a plot against the royal queens, and he doesn't care about the damage it causes you. Vayomer HaMelech Achashverosh, the king Achashverosh said, Vayomer LeEsther HaMalka. So it says he said twice in the pasuk. So Vayomer Lamali. Why does it say it twice? Amar Rabbi Yavo Betchila Al Yedei Torgeman. First, when he was originally talking to her, before she revealed herself, now she actually revealed her backstory. Now she said, I am from the Jews, and I come from royalty actually, because my great-great-grandfather was Shaul HaMelech. So before, when he was speaking to her, he spoke to her through a translator, because he didn't think that it was appropriate to talk to her directly as she's not of royal descent. But then when he realized, when she said, I'm from the family of Shaul, which is Malchut, kingship, then it says Vayomer a second time because he spoke to her directly. Just 1 second. Yeah, fine. Let's continue. Atomer Esther, and Esther points at seemingly Haman, and she says, Ish tsar ve'oyev Haman harazeh. It says like this. She said to Achashverosh, this tsar ve'oyev, enemy and foe, Haman harazeh, this wicked Haman. Now, Psukim implies she's talking about two different people. Because first she says, this wicked enemy, and then she says, Haman harazeh. So the Gemara tells us, Amar Rabbi Lazar, difficult drasha, but Rabbi Lazar says, Melamed, it teaches us, originally, she was pointing her hands at Achashverosh, and she said, Tsar v'oyev. Regarding Achashverosh, she meant to say, you're the enemy of the Jews, really. Uba malach v'satar yada klape Haman. The malach came and pushed her hand, turned her hand towards Haman. Now you have to know what the pshat was, because if she's really pointing at Achashverosh, I mean, what's the plan? Well, what are you planning is going to happen exactly? It's not going to turn out well. You have to know exactly what the pshat on this is. Rashi doesn't say much here. He just says that that's the emphasis of the psukim. It's difficult to drasha. So the psukim tell us when he sees that Achashverosh sees Haman has this plot against her, he gets upset, he storms out of the room, and it says, Va'amelech kam b'chamato, the king got up with his anger, and he went outside to the garden. And then it says, Va'amelech shav miginat baitan, he returned from the garden of the palace. So makeh shiva lekima, we could compare his leaving to his returning. Why? Makima b'chema, just as his getting up and leaving was with anger, af shiva b'chema, also when he returned, it was with anger. Why? Because what happened was, he went out to the garden to cool off, because he was so upset at Haman. And he gets there, and he sees there are angels that dressed up like, they were like landscapers. It looked like these people driving up in their truck to dig up, right? And he saw they're digging up the trees of his orchard, of his garden. So if Amalei said to them, what are you doing? So Amalei, they said, Defaktinan Haman. Haman commanded us to dig up your trees. So this was like the nail in the coffin. And it made Achashverosh even more upset. So he came back in his anger. He gets back to his house, his palace. Va'aman nofel al hamita. Now, it says in the psukim, Haman was fallen. It sounds like he was actively falling on Esther's bed. Now, the simple pshat is he was begging for his life. But it looked like he was trying to abuse the queen, exactly, take advantage of the queen, which you could imagine further upset Achashverosh. So nafal mi baile, it should have said he had fallen if it meant he was just begging for his life. So Rabbi Lazar Melamed, it teaches us he was actively falling. Sheba malach v'hipilu aleha. What happened was a malach came and shoved Haman, so he fell on Esther, and it looked like he was trying to hurt the queen, abuse the queen. So Amar Vaimi Beita Vaimi Bara. Achashverosh said, "Woe to you from the inside, woe to you from the outside." Means you have nothing going for you right now, and there's only a direction of punishment. Yomer HaMelech, the king said, "Hagam lechvosh et hamalka imi b'bayit." Do you want to even conquer the queen, assault the queen? Excuse me. When I'm still in the house. The Yomer Charvona. So Charvona pipes up. He's one of the officers, Vegomer, and he says, "You know, that Haman had built a gallows, the 50 amot tall. It's great for the purpose of killing him." So Rabbi Lazar, Af Charvona Rasha Ba'ata Eitzah Haya. Really, Charvona was not a innocent person. He was happy for the Jews to be killed. He was part of this idea of Haman initially. But once he saw his advice was not going to work, because ultimately the tides were turning, Miyad Barach, immediately he ran away, meaning he changed his plan. That's what it means in Iyov when it says, it says he threw on him, meaning Hashem threw the punishment on the wicked, without mercy, from his hand, he ran away, and meaning the implication of the pasuk is that in a situation where initially the people seem to support him, when things turn around, they run away and they don't support him anymore. And it says in the psukim, after Haman was brought out to be killed, the anger of the king subsided. It calmed down. So shtei shchichot halalu lama. It says shochacha, which is double language. Why does it say double language? Achat shel malko shel olam, achat shel Achashverosh. One was that HaKadosh Baruch Hu calmed down, means he was now happier, is that Haman had been killed. Rashi explains actually, interesting, is that the Jews had bowed to Avodah Zarah in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, and Haman also, his hanging indicated some sort of a forgiveness for that. That's what the Maharsha explains over here. So that's why Hashem's anger was subsided, and also Achashverosh on a simple pshat level is because he was now calmed down that Haman, his seeming enemy or conspirator against him, had been killed. But Amril and others say, Achat shel Esther v'achat shel Vashti. Another pshat is that one refers to how Achashverosh was no longer upset about Vashti being killed, and the other in the attempt to have Esther to be killed as Esther had laid out. I think we're going to stop over here. Zat Hashem. We'll pick up, we're stopping the bottom of Tet Zayin Amud Aleph. We'll pick up tomorrow with Tet Zayin Amud Bet. Zat Hashem.
Thank you.
Wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you.